Hello everyone, and welcome to this multiple part series on setting up and using Visual Studio Code for research coding. Specifically, I will be going over how you can do Python development using VSCode, and in this first part of the series we will just go over the basics on how you can install, set up and run simple scripts or development projects within Visual Studio Code. And I'll be doing this on a Ubuntu machine, but similar steps can be followed on other operating systems. um, so let's get started. So for the purpose of this tutorials, I have created a repository with all the guidance notes, which I will be updating throughout the development of these interactive sessions. And the idea there is that one can refer to the text guidance and follow it along, and if they get stuck they can then refer to the videos um, and then continue with the setup. So let's get started. So the first step we need to do, if you are going to do Python development, is to access Python interpreter, and that comes in multiple sources. So in my case, I utilize the inbuilt package manager from Ubuntu to get all the packages for setting up Python. But alternatively, you can utilize Anaconda to set up and follow the same steps that have been outlined here, although the commands may be slightly different. So the first step we need to do is to install Python virtual environment package. What this package does is it allows us to create a sandbox environment, specifically for the cases where you are potentially, let's say, sharing a machine with multiple users like a server, or you are probably working with multiple projects that have different dependencies and their own requirements. So what you can then do is create multiple virtual environments, and set up with the requirements for each project, installing all the packages within those virtual environments. In this way, you won't be affecting the whole system dependencies and package lists for Python, and still be able to work on multiple projects or multiple users at the same time. And then once you are done with the project, you can essentially clean your machine by just deleting that sandbox virtual environment. So as you can see, I've already got this virtual environment, and then once you have that package, in my case I already have that, you need to create a virtual environment location where all the packages will be installed and kept. Again, this command I already have installed, but I'll just go over what this actually means. So you'll run the virtual environment command, you'll give it a folder. So for the purpose of this tutorial and for reference for anyone, I've followed the structure where I have created a virtualenv folder within /opt, and within that folder I can have multiple virtual environments, which will essentially be multiple folders, each one having its own dependencies and everything. So in this case I am just installing a new virtual environment in this location, and then with -p option I am giving it the Python interpreter that I want. So let's say you want Python 3.1, or you want 3.10 or 3.9, or any other version. You can specify it here. For the purpose of this tutorial, I am not specifically looking into specific version, so I can just go ahead and say any Python 3 should do, which is this command. So I've also created this virtual environment already, as you can see from here. And then we will talk about how you can access this from um, from within Visual Studio Code in the next couple of minutes. So that's done with the Python setup and everything you will do. Let's say for the first project, we will be doing it using this virtual environment. So anything we install or any dependencies that we want, we can have those installed, not system wide, but just under this environment. So the next step is to set up the Visual Studio Code, and for that you can go to this link and download the package. So since I am on Ubuntu, I will be needing a Debian package, so I'll just click on this and download that. um, Once it downloads, you can then go ahead and install it by running the command that is shown over here. So for example, this one, which is basically using the Debian package manager and installing the Visual Studio Code package. What this installation will do is, first it will install Visual Studio Code, and then secondly it will set up the package repository for Visual Studio Code. Hence, if any future updates come available, you will be able to use the apt package manager to update and get to the latest version of Visual Studio Code. So once this is done, you can go from start and type code, which will open Visual Studio Code instance. And when it opens for the first time, it will give you the options for in my I've already, so we are seeing in the left hand side, but if you're opening it, let's say, let me try that. So if you're opening it for the first time, you may see something like this. You will be able to set up initial things within the VS Code. So I think it's this one. Yeah. So you'll be able to walk through setting up the themes and everything. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I am not going to go over that. You can explore and find the best options. So once you open Visual Studio Code, by the way, there are multiple ways of accessing VS Code. So the other way, the first one that I already showed, the other way is like you can go to a specific folder and type code space dot. It will open Visual Studio Code with that folder open. So I think before going into the details of that, one thing that is relevant here is that within VS Code, the projects are managed by having just a folder for a project. So for example, you are working with problem A and problem B, so you will have a folder called problem A, which will be containing all the files and all the project files for that project. You can open that in Visual Studio Code, and that will be a self-contained project. And similarly, you can do same for project B. So you can have two windows, each one looking at different folders, and each folder will be corresponding to a specific project. So let me just walk through the interface here before going into the details of how we can set up. So when you open VS Code for the first time, you will see some icons on the left hand side on the top, and then some icons on the bottom, and then there will be a bar in the bottom where you will see multiple options, and I will go over some of these in either this or the next tutorial. So the icons that we see on the left top are the most relevant ones for us. So the first one is the Explorer, which will, if you have opened a folder, it will give you the list of all the files. So for example, I open some folder, like for example, let's say temp folder, right? So this will have all the files that we, and then we can create a folder or create a file or refresh the explorer. So if you have new files coming in, it will refresh and show those. You also have search functionality um, within the scope of the project folder, so you can search anything and it will highlight the code as well as files that have same name. Mostly this is used for looking through the code and finding out where your function is used within a given project. The third one is the version control. So I will not touch this within this tutorial, but if you are using, for example, GitHub or any other version control system to keep track of your projects, you'll be able to see all those options here, like with all the branches and um, the repositories and any code that you need to commit or pull, you will be able to access that from here. The third one is to run and debug, and once you have some code, you can run and debug from here, but for the purpose of this tutorial, we'll be just running a simple hello world uh, Python script. So I'll be just showing like quickly what this is, but maybe in the next couple of tutorials I will go over more details of how you can use this tab. And the last one here on the top is for extensions, and extensions are basically what make it powerful by itself. VS Code equivalent to an editor, let's say a notepad, but what makes it more powerful and very useful or productive are the extensions. And there are many extensions that totally improve or change the interface and the functionality that is present within VS Code. So in this extension bar, you can search for specific extensions. So for example, you're not doing Python, you're doing C++ development, so you can search C++, and it will show you all the extensions along with the ratings from other user and how many downloads and other details. So if you click on an extension, you'll be able to see all the details, including the versions and how to use it and any other documentation on getting started with this extension. So the last bit you will see here is the install button, which will allow you to install this or any particular extension if you click on the install, and you will get that functionality within the editor here. So for our case, we want to do Python development, and there was a Python package, so this is the package, and what it allows us to do is to um, do a bunch of operations related to Python, but the main one that is important for this purpose of this tutorial is to be able to debug and execute um, Python scripts, right? So I'll just go ahead and install this. It will take a while to it the once this is installed, Python functionality with the file is right now into how it applies script for this tutorial. And let's say I want to print some command, let's say a hello world, right? So I'll just go ahead and save it, and let's just see the progress of that extension. Yeah, it is still installing. Okay, so our Python extension has been installed, and once this is installed, if you go back to your folder and let's say you open any Python file with .py extension, you should be able to see an additional set of options that are coming available here. And then what we need to do is select the interpreter. So you can see that it's already selected as the default Python interpreter. So let's just run this script. So you can do that by clicking run and debug, which will give you a bunch of options of what type of file you running a Python file. Once you select command, get some output. So script successfully. So now let's imagine that this um, this script has some dependencies and it's a project that we're trying to run, and we want to keep that in a sandbox like we discussed previously, that I mentioned about the virtual environment. So how can we use the virtual environments within VS Code? So you can go here in the interpreter where you have 3.10 written, and then if you click that, it will ask you for the option to enter the interpreter path. So here we can browse or we can type. So um, so this will be the path to the virtual environment that we previously created, and specifically to the Python 3 binaries for the interpreter. So once we do that, you'll see that it's no more a system path, it's a path for the Venv virtual environment that is selected. And again, if we run it, we can run it through here, but also use F5 to execute run and debug, and you can see that it ran fine. So this is good. I think this is the main gist of setting up and running a Python script, and the purpose of the first tutorial to just get things started. There are a couple of things here that you can potentially improve. So for example, if you have many projects, every time you go and select this interpreter, it will be quite tedious. By the way, you only have to select this one. So if I come back to this folder again, VS Code will remember which interpreter we were using for this project, and it will automatically try to load that interpreter. But again, like if you are starting a new project, you will be stuck initially with the system Python interpreter, and what you can do is you can then select in a similar way like we did each time the interpreter. So that can be quite tedious. So the steps I have here are guiding us how we can set a specific VS Code set specific version environment in VS Code as default, and you can do that by accessing this settings option. So settings option can be accessed by pressing Control comma, and then you will be presented with a tab with settings. All the settings are present here, so you can modify each and every bit of this coding environment. The main thing to note here is that you have a user and a workspace tab with both have the same settings, but in the user tab, any changes you do will go towards your own profile only, whereas if you're an administrator and you change the workspace settings, it will be applied globally for all the users using this PC or this laptop. So for the purpose of this tutorial, we just want to modify the virtual environment paths, which is under settings.json, and we need to add this string. So how you can access that settings.json is by so these are the settings that we can change, but you can access those settings as JSON by clicking on this link, and it will give you. So this is the path settings on your machine. In any case, like if you have set up something that is messing up with the system and it's not starting or some issues, you can go ahead and delete this file to restore the defaults. So in this case, I just want to add this this setting for the Python path, and that will tell it that anytime there is a new project, we just pick one of the existing virtual environments as the default unless the user changes the path. In a similar way, you can set up the root directory for the virtual environments. So all the virtual environments in your system shows up when you are selecting. Let's say when you click here, all the options for the virtual environment show up here, not just the one that you have selected. So to do that, you can go ahead, close this. You need to search for virtualenv, and so these are the paths that we need to give. So so in this case, we want to give a virtual environment path, which is our virtual ends. Once we have that, any path, any virtual environment that we create under that path will be shown in the list of integrators. So that's about it for the first set of tutorials in a series of tutorials. In the next tutorial, we'll go a little bit more into details about what are the different extensions and how you can utilize them to maximize productivity. And in the initial steps, we will try to set up a project and look at the workflow for development within that project. In the follow-up tutorials, we will look into more advanced topics like remote development, which is major plus using Visual Studio Code. You can do all bunch of operations for remote development, and it really is where this editor shines, and I'm really looking forward to going over that. So that's it for now. Let me get back to you in the next tutorial.